Hello. The claim I'm responding to today is that the universal health care bill will cause significant harm in our nation. My opponent's secondary claims are: 1, that the universal health care bill is unrealistic in our economy; 2, that universal health care will raise taxes dramatically; and 3, universal health care will be available to illegal immigrants and cause significant harm. So let's begin with the first one. That universal health care is unrealistic in our economy. He begins by offering a piece of evidence that says that there are 1.5 million doctors per 311 million patients in the United States. And that ratio would mean that each doctor would get 207 patients. And he claimed that this ratio wouldn't work, but offered no evidence to prove that and why it would be unacceptable. We may have more citizens than Canada, as he said, but we also have more doctors both in number and ratio. Here's a quote by Cato.org that says that Canadian doctors see 50% more patients than the doctors in the United States. 50% would mean that they see 311 patients versus the 207 in America. So if it works in Canada with fewer doctors, then why wouldn't it work in America with more doctors? He also stated that there's no way to fund it in our current economical situation, and he offered a figure that we are in $14 trillion worth of debt. Yes, he was correct, but he failed to show how it would be unrealistic. He provided evidence saying that the United States spends 40% more per capita than any other country with universal health care. And actually, that piece of evidence supports that America can afford universal health care. Because we're already spending too much on our current system, we could afford to spend less money. CT Health says that single-payer universal health care costs would be lower than the U.S. current system due to the lower administrative costs. The United States spends 50 to 100% more on these costs than single-payer systems. By lowering these costs alone, the U.S. would have the ability to provide universal health care, increase benefits, and still save money. He also claims that insurance is very important, but I believe that everyone has the right to choose their own insurance provider. And recall, he just used the word "I," and recall, he is not an expert, so you can pretty much just throw that piece of information out. His second claim was that universal health care will raise taxes dramatically. The United States government is already in debt, taking on others' responsibilities. That was what he said, and he cited no source, and therefore is only stating his opinion. So you can throw that out as well. He follows that to say that it's not the government's responsibility to bail out all citizens who are not responsible enough to insure themselves. Again, he cited no source for that and is just stating his opinion on the matter. And also recall, he has no information to do with taxes, and therefore his lack of evidence in general failed to show if or how taxes would go up due to this bill. His third claim was that universal health care will be available to illegal immigrants and will cause significant harm. He assumed that this will encourage illegal immigrants to cross American borders. He continues to follow that pattern that he does not cite a source. He also does not say what significant harm it would cause, if any at all. He says there's an estimated 13 million illegal immigrants in the United States, but he follows to say that will encourage them to have children within U.S. borders. As we all know, they already do that, so saying that the universal health care will cause that is a false claim. The cause-effect relationship is not significant and not even present. His two subsecondary points have no relevance to whether or not illegal immigrants would cause harm to our nation, and fails to cite any sources. In conclusion, my opponent failed to offer significant evidence, therefore disproving his secondary claims. He only offered 4 pieces of supporting evidence throughout his entire speech. Everything else he offered to you was assumed, self-proclaimed, or offered support to the contrary claim, as I just showed you. Thank you.
All right, the main proposition and the secondary claims are laid out well. You transition clearly to the first point. The argument about the comparison between Canada and the United States, I think, would work a little bit better if you could show the Canada system was effective, that it is productive, and that the 50% more that they see simply means that they're more efficient as opposed to they're overworked or that people are getting neglected, because I would assume that that would probably be his inference. But I thought you had a pretty reasonable analysis on the numbers there. The issue about the debt is challenged a little bit, although I'm not sure there's a lot of dispute about some of the cost issues. The best argument that you have on this first point is the counterclaim that says the single-payer system would actually reduce costs because it cuts down the bureaucratic administrative costs substantially. I think that you would need to show some additional evidence on that. It sounds like a pretty informed claim, but some example, for instance, your inference seems to be that because U.S. healthcare costs are high, that's primarily because of the bureaucratic, and I think that you need some proof on that inference, just like you're saying the advocate needs proof on the opposite inference. I thought that was, like I said, the best of the counterclaims that you've had. The tax issue is labeled. I thought that you had an okay challenge on it. There's a value claim in here that the advocate makes, and you kind of dismissed some of the value claims. It would be probably appropriate to present a counterclaim on some of these issues, or to provide some evidence suggesting that the inference that the advocate's making is not valid. The presses that you're giving are okay presses, but they're not necessarily as convincing as some sound evidence would be. That was the same problem on issue number 3. You have a good job about challenging some assumptions. I did like the challenge on the argument about illegals crossing and having kids here. You basically say they're doing that already, so it's a uniqueness argument, and that works pretty well. Also, there's, like you said, there's an absence of any evidence to suggest what the numbers would be like with a universal health care alternative being available. You kind of suggest that his lack of evidence disproves the point. I'm not sure that it disproves the point, but it might undermine the proof that he's provided, so you want to be careful about the phrasing on that. And like I said, I think it would probably help if you had a little bit more evidence after that first point to make the points that you're presenting.